I'm Dana Healy, and you're listening to Cities Speak.
Chief Erika Scheider began her career with the Roseville Police Department in 1997. Before then, she earned a master's degree from the University of St. Thomas in police leadership, a graduate certificate from the University of Virginia, and a BA from Augsburg College. During her time in the police department, she received several promotions and new responsibilities, as well as prestigious awards such as the Meritorious Award from the Minnesota Chiefs of Police Association. In 2020, she has been appointed Roseville Chief of Police. Chief, welcome. Thank you so much for joining us today.
Thank you so much for having me. Appreciate it.
So, can you tell us a little bit about your background in public safety before you were named the chief of police?
Sure. So, as you mentioned, I started my career in 1997, and that was here in Roseville. So, I've served the Roseville community my entire career. I started off working patrol, so in a squad car, responding to 911 calls out in the community. Did that for a number of years, and then was promoted to a detective position and served for a number of years in working in our investigation unit. Was fortunate enough to get promoted after that and actually supervised our investigation unit. And then over about the past 10 years, have moved into a number of different leadership positions, including lieutenant of patrol, lieutenant of operations, and then up to deputy chief before being named chief earlier or in 2020.
So, what inspired you to join the police department? What really wakes you up in the morning to be involved with the community?
Yeah, so when I was going to Augsburg College, I wasn't really sure what I was going to do. My major was in psychology with a minor in communications, and I had planned to go to graduate school after graduating. At the time, I was doing a internship with repeat DWI offenders because at the time, I believed I wanted to go into social work or corrections. But I ended up doing a ride along as part of that internship, working with these repeat DWI offenders, and I realized that police work was exactly what I had been looking for. You know, being able to be out in the community and really being able to have an impact on people that are a lot of times going through a really difficult time. And so, finished up my 4-year degree at Augsburg College, and then I went to Metro State to get my certificate, and then was fortunate enough to be hired here in Roseville. But it really was that ability to, be out in the community and really making a impact in people's lives.
Do you recall that first ride along that you went on?
I do. So it was in Minneapolis was actually in their traffic unit because at that time I was doing this internship with DWI offenders. So really wanted to see how the process worked from the beginning. And what I realized is on that evening shift that I rode along, there were so many different calls where the officer had the opportunity to have an impact on folks. You know, it wasn't just focusing on traffic enforcement, but there was calls, whether it was domestics that he responded to, or just 911 calls for people looking for help. And I realized that this career really has an opportunity that you can make a difference in so many people's lives.
So, you're the first new police chief in about a decade. So, how does it feel to step in a role that really hasn't been held by anybody else in so long?
Yeah, so I was really fortunate to work for former Chief Mathwig for the last decade in his role. And he was just not only a wonderful leader, but a wonderful mentor to me. And so it was great to be able to be under his leadership and kind of see how he ran the department. Both he and I really had a lot of the same philosophies as far as the priority being on, being out in the community and building relationships, being transparent. So I feel really fortunate stepping into this role that I really had 10 years under his leadership and his mentorship to prepare for this.
So you've been a police officer since 1997, and you did name off a few of the positions that you were held and then promoted through. Some other patrol officer, detective, explorer, advisor, so many more. So how have those positions prepared you for your new role as chief?
Yeah, so now that I'm leading the entire department, it certainly has helped me knowing firsthand how different parts of the department function. As I'm meeting with the detectives, I've been in their role before, so certainly understanding how things work definitely has prepared me for this position. Another thing is our department has always placed a really large emphasis on training. Training is just really important, and so I've been fortunate over the years to attend a number of trainings that have helped prepare me. As you mentioned, I got my master's degree back a number of years ago, but then in addition to that, I also went to a 10-week FBI National Academy in Quantico, and there I spent 10 weeks with leaders from across the world, really learning some of the leadership skills that are needed to effectively lead a department. So not only I think the positions I've served in have helped prepare me, but all of the training that I've gone to over the years, and I really think it was important that our department continues to value that training because it really is so important, not only for our officers, but training the future leaders of the department.
That's great. Thank you so much for that. So I'd like to switch gears a little bit. Topics such as police reform, we've heard the term defunding the police have been circulating in the news. Could you expand a little bit about that? What are your thoughts about kind of the narrative going on in the news?
Yeah, so I think the Roseville Police Department has always been very progressive at looking at how we need to evolve, how we need to change, how we can serve the community better. And really starting back in 2015, when the report came out on the 21st century policing pillars, and that was a task force that was put together to try to identify how can police departments operate and serve the community better. And when that report came out, we really took a close look at it here in Roseville to see how could we do better. So as there's a lot of conversations about how can the police departments reform, I think we've really been ahead of the curve. We've been talking about these same conversations since 2015, and how can we do better? And one of the big things we focused on is building trust with our community and being more transparent. And so over the last 5 years and continuing forward, that's going to continue to be our priority. One of the things we did on our webpage, there's a lot of information that the public can go and get as far as, like our use of force report, our traffic report, the department demographics. So I think that's when we're talking about police reform, I think we've been looking at that since 2015. How do we continue to evolve and get better and become more effective at serving the community and building trust? As far as defunding, I think one of the things, I don't support defunding the police. I think that there are certainly things that we as a community need to fund, but I don't think it needs to be at the expense of the police department. Mental health, for instance, we know that there needs to be more mental health funding because we're often the last call. We talk to families that they've tried to call, they've tried to get their family members help, and they just reach dead ends. The hospitals are overwhelmed. The different facilities just don't have beds available. And so often we become the last call. So absolutely support that there needs to be additional funding, especially for mental health, addiction. This last summer, we've seen a lot more people experiencing homelessness. So we know that there definitely are needs out there. And our hope is that those can be funded so that we aren't the call, so that somebody can get help before it turns into a crisis situation.
Thank you for that. So in recent news that's affected the police department morale, have you seen that impact in your own department? And if so, are there things that you're working on to help boost morale?
Yeah, so this is something, officer wellness is something that we've been looking at for several years. We actually have a wellness committee within the police department because we recognize, officers see a lot of trauma. We go out and see things, that stay with us for our whole career. And, we have officers that have been hurt in the line of duty. And, those experiences can be really difficult. And so we recognize that for officers to be effective, they need to be healthy, both emotionally and physically. And so we really have prioritized officer wellness as one of our top priorities the last couple years. One change that we just made starting in 2021 is we used to have an optional program where if officers wanted to go to a mental health provider, the police department funded that. that was just optional. And what we found was we didn't have as many people taking advantage of it as we had hoped. And so this year, with everything going on, we decided this is going to be mandatory. And so every single one of our officers and staff, it's everybody within the police department, including myself, will be meeting with a licensed mental health provider here in the next 3 months for a wellness check-in. It's just designed to talk about, making sure our officers are staying healthy. If they do have things that they're struggling with, then we can get them the appropriate help they need. But really, officer wellness is really important now, especially with everything that's happened this last year.
That's a great change to go from an optional to a mandatory. Sometimes just opening that door to get people to take advantage of that is all you need to do. So that's really, really great. So, what in Roseville? What are some public safety issues that we may be facing right now? And can you tell us a little bit about kind of the plan for the year?
Sure. So one thing that we definitely have seen more issues with in the last couple of years is mental health related calls, people that are in crisis. And so we are looking at, we partnered with Northeast Youth and Family Services, and we're looking at really bolstering that program through grants. So we've applied for a grant, and we're hoping to be able to have a full-time mental health case worker on site that could either respond on calls with us, or that could work with some of the individuals that we might have come in contact with in the community. So that's something we're certainly hopeful that we can make happen. Again, we do have a partnership already with them, but we recognize that there's more of a need, and that we could justify and certainly have a full-time position. So the other thing that we're really excited about in 2021 is we received funding for a community action team. And so that will be a team that will be able to go out in the community and solve whether it might be problem properties. It might be a house on a street that we're seeing an uptick in criminal activity. It might be going out to some of our homeless encampments and talking to individuals and helping connect them to resources in the community. So it's just going to be, a lot of times the officers working the street, they've got 911 calls stacking, so they don't have a lot of time to spend on calls to try to connect people to the right resources. So this community action team is going to be instrumental in, hey, let's figure out what's really going on with the situation and how we can address it so that we don't get called back over and over again. The team's still in the process of getting up and running, but we just had a person that came up the other day to the police department looking for some property, and she was homeless. And one of the members of our community action team was able to give her a ride down to a shelter, actually stopped and got her some food along the way, and then was able to meet with the shelter staff to try to get her to some long-term solutions. And again, without that team, that would have been tough, because if you pull an officer off the street, now we're short. And but with this community action team, we'll be able to have officers dedicate more time to trying to address whether it's crime trends or mental health, addiction, or problem properties.
That's such a great, like, proactive policing, like really getting out into the community. So is that grant for 1 year, or is it potential for longer than that?
Yeah, so it was approved through our city council in this last budget, and our hope is obviously that this will continue forward. And it really came out of what we were hearing from the community. They really wanted officers to be in their neighborhood and helping and working with them to solve crime. And so that's really our focus, is working with the community. How do we address these problems? A lot of times it's going to take more than just the police department. It might be working with homeless outreach workers, or it might be working with code enforcement on a problem property, that there's not only police issues but code issues and quality of life issues. So our hope is that this will continue to move forward, and that certainly is the plan. But we're obviously really grateful that we were able to make this happen, because that's what we've heard from the community. They want officers to work with them to solve some of these problems that are affecting their neighborhoods.
Yeah, that sounds like a really great initiative. I'm excited to see what what the department will do with that. So, advice would you give someone who's interested in joining the police department, and how would they go about doing that?
Yeah, so the biggest thing, when I started, the things that we were looking for in candidates is, security experience. We were looking for people that maybe had worked at a police department as like a community service officer. What we're finding now as we're hiring is we're looking for people that have life experience. Maybe they've worked at like a crisis center. Maybe they've worked at a hospital in a mental health unit. So I really encourage people that are interested in law enforcement, get some experience, not just police or security related experience, but experience that's going to teach you and help you develop your communication skills, being able to talk to somebody that's going through a crisis situation. And so there's obviously a specific path to get licensed here in Minnesota, and there's information that on the Minnesota Post Board, that's who regulates our license, as far as how you can do that. There's certain schools that you have to go through to get that training. But then as far as preparing yourself, being able to develop those soft skills, those communication skills, those problem solving, and having that life experience that really gives you empathy towards what other people are going through.
I love that word, empathy. I think that's such a powerful thing, especially for our police officers to have and enact on within our community. Thank you so much for your leadership, Chief Scheider. We're really excited to have you here. And 9 North is here to help you with your communications and transparency if you do need help with that.
Absolutely. And thank you so much for having me today. I appreciate it.
You've been watching City Speaks. Leave a comment below. We would love to feature a comment for our next podcast about what you think of this program. Please like and subscribe to our podcast to keep up to date with the latest news in our community.
You've been listening to City Speaks. If you've enjoyed this show, please like, comment, and share on social at 9 North Media.